This episode is brought to you by Sailing Santa, Early Cobb, Jeff, Joseph, Sean, and Brian Blanche, this week's newest patrons and contributors. This week we're hitting another huge number in the boat buying world at $200,000 US. And for that kind of money, you better believe we have some pretty high expectations. This boat better be everything we need it to be, plus a little bit extra, a little bit of wow factor once you go see it. And it can't be a money pit either that needs a ton of work. It has to be pretty well ready to get up and go. This week on Everything You Need to Know, the $200,000 Sailboat Showdown. The first boat we're going to look at today is kind of a gem, and not only because it's legendary designer, but it looks like it also has a few fresh coats of paint, and a fair amount of refitting has already been done. It's also a big, heavy world cruiser ready to take you on any adventure your heart desires. This is a 1977 Bruce Roberts design 53-footer, and there are over 700 of these out in the cruising world right now that were completed off this design, and they're all doing exactly what Bruce Roberts intended them to be doing. They're out world cruising in safety and comfort. But this one in particular isn't just what Bruce Roberts designed. This one has been overbuilt beyond the original design. Its acclaimed glass layup 42% heavier than was needed, and instead of the measly little 85 horsepower that she was intended to have from the factory, this one got the 130 horsepower unit that lives in a soundproofed engine room. She's also obviously a center cockpit, so you're more likely to stay dry when you're at sea and less likely to fall out. And this is the catch rig, and the mast comes in specifically at 62 feet, and there's a reason for that. The bridge clearance on the ICW is usually 63 or 65 feet, so this boat can accommodate that. And that sail plan is massive with tons of options for whatever kind of sailing you might want to do, whether you're making ocean passages and long crossings or just little day hops between the islands. And while you're sailing, you have no less than 17 winches to let you control that sail plan. So even if you're short-handed, everything on this boat was set up to be run by a single couple rather than a whole team of people with crew. And to make docking easier, you even get a bow thruster. And you get things like an electric windlass, a life raft, a 20,000-pound encapsulated keel, and the entire interior has been insulated with inches of closed cell foam. So no matter where you go, you'll be able to keep this thing air conditioned or heated to make sure you're always comfortable. And speaking of comfort, inside you'll find over 100 board feet of teak and maple in this beautiful craftsmanship, and it's all set up to be lived on. The current owners, in fact, have lived aboard for 30 years, and in that time, they never stopped upgrading and maintaining this boat, and it shows. This boat is fully outfitted with everything you could imagine ever needing in a world cruiser, and it's very obviously been a labor of love by the owners, a labor of affection, and the culmination of sort of a life's work while at sea. Everything is done, and looking at the pictures, it's done to a very, very high standard. There's an electric cooker and a gas cooker. There's a washer and dryer. There's reverse cycle air conditioning and diesel heat. There's an 8 cubic foot refrigerator and an 8 cubic foot freezer. There's a microwave, an ice maker, even a trash compactor. And you don't think about things like a trash compactor, but as you generate garbage while you're out cruising, it takes up a lot of space, so this makes sense. It also has accommodations that are massive. You get a huge owner's cabin in the back, and up front you get stacked bunks for the crew, and in the middle, a drop table for the guests. This is the kind of boat that you make an appointment to go see it, you study the pictures good and hard before you go so you know what you're looking for, and then when you get there and get aboard, you try not to fall in love with it, and then you make an offer and you get a survey, and then you just go sail around the world in total comfort without the slightest hesitation. This is a great boat. For 200 grand, I challenge you to find anything more appropriate for that job than this thing. And speaking of surveys, you guys ask me a lot to recommend a surveyor for whatever area that you might be boat shopping in. And the truth is, I can't really do that. I help a lot of people buy and sell sailboats, but surveyors are kind of a rare breed. Any major boating city like Annapolis or St. Augustine is only going to have one or two, maybe three surveyors actually operating in that area. And most of them won't travel. They don't have to. There's enough work locally. So your pick on surveyors is kind of limited to who's actually there. Google is your friend here. Read everything you can about those few surveyors you have access to, and then you sort of pick the best one. The only recommendation I can make is it's always a good idea to ask what surveyor the seller's broker recommends, and then you can pick somebody else. And not that surveyors are going to lean one way or another, but having an outside opinion that isn't that of the seller's broker is always a good idea, especially when you're spending 200 grand. Also consider that most of these boats have probably had a survey in the last 3, 4, 5, 10 years. And it's very common for a boat to come with one, albeit it might be outdated. Your insurance company is probably going to say a survey older than 2 years is no longer relevant. And that's fine. But if it already comes with a survey that's 5 years old, who did that survey? It would be nice to get a surveyor that maybe already knows the boat. Okay, so what if you love the idea of this Bruce Roberts and its go anywhere nature and its tough as nails physique, but 53 feet is just way more boat than you want to be able to handle, even with a bow thruster. Or maybe 53 feet is way more than you want to pay for in bottom paint. This $200,000 price point just wouldn't be the same without an entry from Island Packet. Island Packets are known the world over, not just for being yellow. Seriously, why are they all yellow? Anyway, the Island Packet is synonymous with super thick hulls and heavy keels and reliability, safety, and comfort anywhere you go. So what do we get from IP at 200 grand? Well, that gives us enough to look at the IP40. That's the model. It's actually a 42-footer, and as always, Island Packet delivers. This full keel monster comes with a wave-crushing 23,000 pounds with a full keel meant to take you anywhere, but it only drafts 4.7 feet, so you can really go anywhere. These were meant for Caribbean cruising in comfort with their 13-foot beam to give you the interior space. This one holds 90 gallons of fuel and 170 gallons of water. I wouldn't want to pay to fill that fuel tank, but that's enough to keep you moving for a long time. And it's a cutter rig to give you lots of options as you cross from island to island. But Caribbean island hopping or Caribbean cruising isn't this boat's only party piece. You can find the IP40 all over the map, from the Med to Australia to Asia, and everyone always says the same thing when they get inside an Island Packet. It seems like a much bigger boat than it is. An Island Packet has this knack for making smaller spaces seem much bigger, and they do it all with an intelligent layout that actually works when you're living on it or at sea, as well as top-of-the-line craftsmanship and joinery, and very comfortable accommodations. They think this stuff through. This version actually has the Pullman berth up front that people really seem to like because it gives you a completely private stateroom up front that can be closed off from the rest of the saloon, and then it has its own massive head up in the bow. In the middle, you obviously get the typical Island Packet layout with settees on both sides and a fold-down table, an adjoining nav station, as well as a good-sized galley, and then the other head with another door leading to the aft stateroom that is another really good-sized space. And this example of the IP40 has already been outfitted with some of the things that you're going to want to have, that you don't have to spend money on later. It already has dinghy davits, for example, for the rib that you're going to need to bring with you when you're island hopping. And these people have already built an arch over the cockpit for the solar panels, and they have a wind generator and a radar up there. These Island Packets are known for their comfort at sea and at anchor because of their overbuilt nature and huge full keels, so they tend to behave in a very sea-kindly way that'll get you some of the rougher stuff, and you're going to appreciate that when you're living on this thing. Lady K Sailing is brought to you by patrons, people who give a couple of bucks an episode to make this whole channel possible. I couldn't do it without you. A big shout out to the existing patrons that have gotten us this far. If you'd like to help out the channel, please consider becoming a patron. So what if you're thinking, yes, Tim, all those boats are well and good for ocean passages and heavy weather, but I'm not so interested in that. I want to island hop in safer waters. And those boats are also a bit too old for me. I'm personally going to spend 95% of my time anchored off a white sandy beach and snorkeling off the transom. I want something a bit more bougie, and I like things like glass vessel sinks and plush white upholstery inside. I want a king-size aft cabin, and I want fancy white walls in the head, not all this teak everywhere. I want a bit newer model. This then is the Catalina 355, and they started building these in 2008 specifically for coastal cruising. It's not heavy, it's just 14,000 pounds, which actually isn't bad for a 35 footer. My 35 footer is 14,000 pounds, and it's a lot. But it only needs 4.5 feet of water, this thing, so you'll be able to get very close to that white sandy beach. On the outside of this boat, we get our massive sugar scoop with a walkthrough to a roomy cockpit where you'll be able to relax for sundowners with your friends. You get sunbrella coverings on everything and some solid stainless work to sort of bring it all together. And you get some cool features here like a folding wheel at the helm and a decent electronics package right out of the gate, as well as an in-mast furling for the main, which will make you more likely to use it. And you get a mount on the stern for a dinghy rail, and they've already bought a Rockna. It's sitting up on the bow roller next to the completely unnecessary electric windlass. Inside, of course, is where these boats tend to shine, and Catalina does not let us down. They rarely do. Remember, this is just a 35-footer, but it doesn't feel like it. We get a nice-sized galley in the head right away as you come down the stairs, followed by a big C-shaped settee that folds down into a bed for your guests. And opposite that, we get 2 captain's chairs with another table that also folds down. And if the coach top side port lights that you get on every boat aren't enough to let the light in, we get a whole second tier of port lights just above the back of the seating. The 355 really is a wonderfully designed boat. It's meant to be lived on. The head, of course, is huge, and we get our glass vessel sink that you absolutely need to be this bougie. And there's a wall-to-wall mirror in the head, though it's right at the right level that all you're ever going to see is how much the sundowners are impacting your waistline. Up front, we get a nice bed that's sort of a semi-walk-around to make it easier for you to get in and out of without waking up your bunkmate. Sleeping accommodations are plentiful in this boat, but as the owner, I suspect you'll want to sleep in the private aft cabin with the sideways bed. It looks like about a queen, though I'm not a fan of these split mattresses. I suspect I'd swap it out for a single-piece memory foam job for the added comfort. I don't like the line down the middle of the bed. And this isn't a very old boat either, so you can expect a clean wiring diagram, clean wiring runs, and everything behind the panels is going to be pretty tidy. And it's production enough that you should be able to get those diagrams from the factory, wiring and for plumbing, and you just can't do that with an older boat. When something goes wrong on a newer boat like this, it's so much easier to diagnose the problem and chase down problems because everything is done on the same way in every boat that they made. So it hasn't had enough owners yet to get it all butchered up. If there's going to be any butchering up doing, we get to do that ourselves. And I kind of like that. Everything about this boat is just so fresh and clean and well laid out. I could seriously see myself living on this thing without much complaint. And it's a 35-footer, so you could easily single-hand it with one hand tied behind your back. Catalina really did make it that easy to own this boat. I get a lot of requests from people asking for help in the boat shopping process, so I dedicated a page at ladyksailing.com for people to ask for help. If you want to book an hour of my time for a chat, head on over to ladyksailing.com/consults. If the newer Catalina is more your flavor, but you really think a 35-footer is just too small, like I do, you can get something newer like that, but also bigger. This is a 2006 Beneteau 473, so it is a little bit older than the Catalina, but that means our money goes a lot further on the waterline. For $200,000, we get a 47-footer, which is much better. And it's much more living space, and the added waterline means we'll be getting where we're going a lot faster than our friends on the Catalina 355, and in more comfort all around. This Benny also gives us a full 24,000 pounds of weight to keep us safe and comfortable, which is 10,000 more than the Catalina, but we pay for it with an extra foot of draft, bringing us to about 5.5 feet. But it's still good for the Keys and the Bahamas. 5.5 is no problem. Everything the Catalina gave us in a production style boat, this Benny just gives us more, a lot more. And we can see from these sort of out of focus and sometimes downright weird pictures that the salon area is huge, very easy to live in, with a huge C-shaped settee. We get a bigger nav station and a bigger galley. And again, sorry for how wildly out of order these pictures are. I didn't do it. I'll skip over the ones that don't make any sense as much as I can. This boat is a 2-stateroom with a huge forward bed and a good size aft cabin as well. The bonus on this boat isn't just the space, however. Here we get a dedicated generator, and we get add-ons like dinghy davits. The Catalina didn't have those. And we get a twin helm to make it easier to navigate through the cockpit and more fun to sail because you can always sit on the right side to give you the best view of the sail trim. And this boat does need some things added, obviously, which will either drive the cost of ownership up or drive the purchase price down, depending on how shrewd your negotiating skills are. I would want, for example, some reasonable solar, so I'm not running that generator all night. I'd also want to freshen up the mattresses and the upholstery in a few spots. It's a bit older boat. And I'd want to add a full enclosure to make the boat more livable in different climates, provide some more shade from the sun. And being a bit older, I'd also want to make sure I can cover the cost of fixing things like refrigeration and electronics. These things are going to break down over time. If you're spending 200 grand on a sailboat right now, what would you buy? What are your favorites or your go-to boats for this type of cruising in this budget? Leave a comment below, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It feeds the algorithm. I'd like to wish a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays from the Lady K family to your family. I hope that you have a wonderful holiday time and you get to spend lots of time with your loved ones. If you want to chat over the holiday season, please consider joining the Lady K Discord. We have a great community over there, and I'll leave a link in the description. I will see you guys next week. Merry Christmas.